So not fired, Kimmel, just suspended indefinitely. This is what got him suspended by ABC News, this monologue.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. Demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish, okay?
It was the beginning of that. Jimmy Kimmel propagating the left-wing lie that Charlie Kirk's assassin was MAGA. What's so notable today are how a lot of people on the left are actually trying to gaslight us and say, that's not actually what he said. That's not actually what he meant. Now, I want to play for you this again.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points.
Trying to characterize this kid who killed Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them. And so Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman, went on Benny Johnson's podcast and said this.
Obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that.
He says that the FCC may get involved. ABC could do this the hard way or the easy way. Notice he didn't say Jimmy Kimmel should be fired. He mentioned suspension. He didn't say fired. And the left, of course, is upset. Here's the problem. I have the receipts for you. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the United States Congress when the Democrats controlled things.
Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. What I will say, though, is while I'm very glad that the person that was arguably responsible for some of the largest, driving some of the most amounts of death threats and violent threats, not just to my office, but to plenty of people across the country, I also kind of feel like I'm like waiting for the cutscene at the end of a Marvel movie after all the credits have rolled. And then you see like the villain's like hand reemerge out to grip over like the end of a building or something. But deplatforming works, and it is important. And there you go. Good things can happen.
That was her. And here is Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader.
These lies continue tonight. Rupert Murdoch, who has admitted they were lies and said he regretted it, has a special obligation to stop Tucker Carlson from going on tonight now that he's seen how he has perverted and slimed the truth, and from letting him go on again and again and again. Not because their views deserve such opprobrium, but because our democracy depends on it.
Our democracy depends on it. And Chuck Schumer himself wrote a letter to Rupert Murdoch. As you noted in your deposition, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and other Fox personalities knowingly, repeatedly, and dangerously endorsed and promoted the big lie that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Though you have acknowledged your regret in allowing this grave propaganda to take place, your network continues to promote, spew, and perpetuate election conspiracy theories to this day. We demand that you direct Tucker Carlson and other hosts on your network to stop spreading false information. And it went on from there. And it was multiple Democratic members of Congress calling on Fox to clean up its airwaves or else. Now, I'm old-fashioned here. I don't think the government should be dictating what networks air or don't air. I don't think Brendan Carr should be using the power of the FCC to threaten ABC over Jimmy Kimmel. I actually think he's the boogeyman here, because what really happened is Nexstar, which owns 37 ABC affiliates, and Sinclair, which owns, I think, about 100, they own more ABC affiliates than any other station group, said they're pulling Jimmy Kimmel. In fact, Sinclair Broadcasting came out very firmly and said it's not enough what they did. Here's the statement. As discussed with ABC earlier today, Sinclair decided to indefinitely preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live beginning tonight. Mr. Kimmel's remarks were inappropriate and deeply insensitive at a critical moment for our country, said Vice Chairman Jason Smith. We believe broadcasters have a responsibility to educate and elevate respectful, constructive dialogue in our communities. We appreciate FCC Chairman Carr's remarks today, and this incident highlights the critical need for the FCC to take immediate regulatory action to address control held over local broadcasters by the big networks. Sinclair's ABC stations will air a special in remembrance of Charlie Kirk this Friday. Sinclair will not lift the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live on our stations until formal discussions are held with ABC regarding the network's commitment to professionalism and accountability. Sinclair calls upon Mr. Kimmel to issue a direct apology to the Kirk family. Furthermore, Sinclair asked Mr. Kimmel to make a meaningful donation to the Kirk family and Turning Point USA. Regardless of ABC's plans for the future of the station, Sinclair intends not to return Jimmy Kimmel Live to our air until we're confident that appropriate steps have been taken. You can say Brendan Carr is the boogeyman all you want, that he's the guy who did this, but let's be clear. This looks, in fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to work for Bob Iger, and he said, this looks staged to me, that they waited for Brendan Carr to come out to say something so that Nexstar and Sinclair could say, yeah, we're out, we're done, giving them greater pretext so they're not dragged into a lawsuit with ABC over suspending Kimmel, that they could force ABC's hand. And let's be real clear here. What Jimmy Kimmel has done, his ratings are not good. And what Jimmy Kimmel has done is he's taken late night TV, where a lot of Americans used to go to after the news as they wound down, and they watched and they laughed together. And he, like Stephen Colbert, very specifically targeted a very progressive audience. Jimmy Kimmel would not have on Republicans. Jimmy Kimmel would make jokes about Republicans. He would not make jokes about Democrats. Instead, he would have them on air to affirm their worldview. Jimmy Kimmel alienated half the nation with a broadcast news outlet. I am in broadcast radio. I don't like the fact that the FCC might want to crack down on something I say. There are certain words I can't say on broadcast. And also, I have a commitment to truth under federal regulation. If there's a massive crime or sensational news story, there are regulations that say I cannot lie about that if that lie would knowingly cause harm. Jimmy Kimmel went on television on Monday. Not coincidentally, the left was trying to seed a narrative to the population that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by someone on the right, and Jimmy Kimmel says just that. And what the left is doing now is saying, no, that's not actually what he said, and also free speech. The left was perfectly fine when the same network, ABC, fired Roseanne, which had its highest rated show, because she made an offensive joke on Twitter. They fired her, and the left applauded it. But Jimmy Kimmel affirms the left's views. Here's the problem. I don't think the FCC should get involved, but the left does. What the left doesn't like is conservatives, the Trump administration, the right, playing by the left rules. Either everybody's got to say this is wrong and can't happen again, or it's going to keep happening. There is an escalation happening, but you're lying to yourself and to others if you think the right started this. Remember, it was Barack Obama who had a YouTuber arrested and blamed for the escalation in Benghazi. It was Barack Obama who did that, targeted a YouTuber. It was the left that harassed a guy in New York for putting up a doctored video of Nancy Pelosi looking like she was slurring her words. They actually targeted that guy, trying to get his job. It is the left that pioneered cancel culture, and then when the right complains, the cancel culture is not a real thing. People have to have consequences for their actions. This is consequences for their actions. Well, guess what? This is consequences for Jimmy Kimmel's actions. No, I don't like Jimmy Kimmel being suspended for what he said. But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel also decided to alienate half the country, and Nexstar and Sinclair had enough. They weren't able to sell ads during their show. You know, what happens is the networks provide content to the local markets, and the local markets sell advertising. In exchange for that, there's a payment of some money, but then they get to sell local advertising. Nexstar and Sinclair in more than half the country couldn't sell local advertising during Jimmy Kimmel because he had alienated their audience. Let me just read you. This is just Nexstar. I didn't even get into Sinclair. Dothan, Alabama, Panama City, Florida, Augusta, Georgia, Rockford, Illinois, Evansville, Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana, Sioux City, Iowa, Topeka, Kansas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Joplin, Missouri, Billings, Montana, Watertown, New York, Youngstown, Ohio, Erie, Pennsylvania, Knoxville, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, the Tri-Cities area of Tennessee and Virginia, Lubbock, Texas, Midland, Texas, Salt Lake City, Wheeling, West Virginia, Clarksburg, West Virginia. Now, there are a few others in there in New York, and there's Richmond, Virginia, and a few others. But these are not exactly progressive areas of the country for most of Nexstar. They couldn't sell advertising in those markets because of Kimmel. And they had repeatedly complained that Kimmel had alienated their audience in their markets. And ABC did nothing. Kimmel has increasingly gotten progressive and partisan. And they finally had enough. On Instagram last week, here's what Jimmy Kimmel said. Instead of the angry finger pointing, can we just have for one day agree that it's a horrible and monstrous thing to shoot another human? Apparently, he really was literal in that. Can we just for one day agree? Because on Monday, he said we hit some new lows over the weekend when the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them. I don't really have much sympathy for Jimmy Kimmel being suspended. I don't think the FCC should have gotten involved. It would have been a lot cleaner had they not gotten involved, because now the left can say, oh, power, power, power. It's the left. But you know what? Here's what's happening. And I want you to pay attention to this, because this is the most important point here. There's not a single person on the left calling to defang the FCC. Not a single person on the left is right now saying the FCC should not have this power. Not a single person on the left is saying we need to reform the FCC or get rid of the FCC. Not a single person on the left is taking that position. They want the power to do what Brendan Carr did. They want the power to bully networks they don't like. I played you the receipts. AOC, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries in a letter. They want the power. They just don't want it used against them. And they resent like hell that the right said, we're defenders of free speech. We don't like this stuff. And now the right's like, well, if they're going to do it, we're going to do it. You're not going to get unilateral disarmament by the right. So either you've got to disarm and work with the right to gut the FCC, or don't expect the right to sit on the sidelines. You want to talk about escalation and who started it? Barack Obama, for God's sakes. He arrested a YouTuber over Benghazi. So you'll forgive me for not liking what happened, but also not caring about what happened and thinking Jimmy Kimmel brought this on himself, because he did bring this on himself. And I'm struggling to really care that they took him off the air, because, you know, he did bring it on himself.